Sarah, if you want, why don't you kick us off with a little bit? I know everybody knows you, but give a little background, a little intro, tell us about DCI, all that.
Okay, of course. So Sarah Fankhauser, President and CEO at DCI. So I have been at DCI for 32 years. Actually came to DCI from a DCI customer. So started in support, been through education, ran support, ran development. I think I've worked every job here. I've been CEO for 5 years, and prior to the time that I was CEO, I was COO for years. So always involved in a lot of the detail, always involved on the customer side. That's my passion. I grew up in customer service, both from a banking side and when I started here. And so that's definitely my passion and certainly DCI's passion as well. So community bank processor, started as a co-op, moved to a
Mhm.
for-profit organization in 1987. We are privately held, owned by 32 banks today. Our shareholders are bankers, like I mentioned, and then our board of directors are made up of customers as well. So all of our board members are CEO from customer banks, except for two individuals who are software specialists. So that's pretty unique in the industry today. The best thing for bankers and for our customers is when those board members are making decisions for DCI, they're also making decisions as a customer. So, always have our customer's best interest in mind as well.
That's
So,
cool.
very
So,
high
I gotta
level
say something
background.
real quick. I was having a conversation with a guy this weekend about that. And he was like, "What makes the best salespeople?" And I said, first, I think you have to be a competitor. I said, second to that, it's product knowledge every time. So when you said that a minute ago about coming through every rank from tech support all the way through actually being a customer, now
Yep.
that is when you talk about rare, that's got to be like one in a million rare.
Well, I appreciate it. And I know enough to be dangerous. I try to stay in the middle of a lot of the details. I'm sure everybody at DCI would love me to get out of some of the details sometimes, but it's what keeps me relevant, I feel like, so that I can have those conversations with bankers when they're wanting to have conversations about what's going on at their bank and when they need help.
Well, you guys have had a rockin' 5 years. Do you
We
want to go
have.
ahead and tell everybody that that's all because of you, or
No, no,
good
no.
chance?
No, you know what? I appreciate the kind words. We've had an incredible few years with record sales the last 7 years, but we are definitely a team effort. We have incredible DCI employees that care very much about the customer. Every single one of the employees care about the customer, whether they're forward facing to the customer or not. We talk a lot at our all employee meetings about it. If you're a programmer, if you're an operations person, it doesn't matter what your position is, you still have a part in our success.
Good call.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit. So it's a wild world today, especially in, I guess, core, which is
Yep.
a big topic these days. Uh,
Hmm.
and I mean, I've never seen so much churn and cycle. I mean,
Uh,
everybody's running way out in backlogs. And I
mm,
mean, we're having conversations with bankers and telling them that and I mean this honestly, at least 3 years out from a renewal is definitely not too soon to be having a conversation. In
yep.
some cases, you may be even a little bit late, right? And I think that's
Mhm.
shifted. So there's a lot of shifting core I'd love to hear from you about. And then kind of emerging differences. I'll say
Mhm.
embedded finance and
Yep.
a lot of
Yep.
digital going on. What do you see? I mean, you've been around it longer than any of us, and especially in your position. What do you see in the core landscape?
So first of all, to your question about what's happening in the industry, yes, we have had record sales for the last several years with new customers coming on board. But this past year and a half, the acquisition market out there has just gone crazy. I typically have a couple banks a year that maybe get acquired, which I hate to see that. And I typically have a couple banks a year that are doing acquisitions. So it's a bit of a wash for us. I have 8 banks on my schedule right now, existing customers that are doing acquisitions in the market. And I have 4 others that are in process that just haven't gotten to the finish line yet. And so it is craziness out there. There's positive and negative to that. Of course, I'm always happy when I'm maintaining that business. Some of those acquisitions are DCI to DCI because we're a little unique in the industry. If it's a DCI to DCI acquisition, I waive early terms and waive deconversion because I'm keeping the business. And I think that's a little unique as well. But some of them are DCI acquiring non-DCI customers as well. But it's definitely, and I know that's not just DCI, that's happening out there in the industry everywhere. As far as what's happening outside of just traditional core, yes, we're having great success in the fintech world. We feel like we have a differentiator there also, outside of just the fact that we have the very modern technology out there. We do direct to bank or direct to core design, so that you don't have to have a middleware like a unit or a Sigtera there in the middle. Now, that's not to say we won't work with them. Yeah, because we will. We have worked with banks that already had those relationships built, and so we'll do that. But quite frankly, we don't see the need. It's one less place for a contract, one less place for a problem, and one less place for a situation where you need to be able to know about your data and not have an issue with your examiners.
Good call.
This morning I had a conversation with one of your banks.
Oh,
The conversation was about, BaaS embedded or a direct bank, can you explain more of which one of these and all three of these and how these all work? And we got done, we went through for over an hour with them talking about all of the ways all this works. And they have two enormously big merchants for a little bitty bank that sit on their board, and they were saying, how do we help them on the card side and all of this? And I said, well, here's the good news, that you're not going to have to make a technology change. Now, a lot of guys can't say that. That's what the uniqueness of what you guys have done. And for anybody out there that doesn't know this, I'm not trying to sell for you, but there's a reason why you're pound for pound the fastest growing, is because you guys tapped into that market early and saw the benefits of how we can take, your average community bank, even a little bitty community bank, and really do some nice things for them if you handle the technology the right way, like you said a second ago. And that particular piece and that conversation this morning, it's going to make all the difference in the world, whether that bank is able to move forward or not.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I love, is this isn't just a market for the big banks out there. This is actually a revenue opportunity in a market for community banks. And I think they have a leg up because they're more agile and they have the ability to adjust a little bit faster than the big guys out there. So I love that. So as much as I hate to report on all the acquisitions that are happening, because I really hate that, I hate to see the market continue to consolidate. I love that this is an opportunity for community banks. And I talk about this all the time. I have a bank in Kansas City with us doing fintech that started as a very small bank. Now, they're not a very small bank today, but that's because they embraced the technology.
That right there is the message of the day. And we were actually commenting about that bank this morning. It's the greatest opportunity. I'm so glad they saw it before they went down that path. And I actually told them on the call, I said, you are the target of everybody that's got the tech idea. Hey, I'll have a tech bank. I want to go find a small bank like yours where you don't see the opportunity, and I'll go in there and do a change in control, and then we'll go in here and we'll tech this bank up to $900 million or whatever it is. And it's because the bankers haven't taken the time to reach out and find out what's going on and what the opportunities are. The tech people are searching for those guys. That's where you see this big opportunity at M&A. There's a lot of them being picked up just to turn them into tech banks.
Just for the charter.
I want to dig into that a little bit, Sarah. So I've thought a lot about this, and I think we've all watched this narrative move over time. I think we all remember, 10 years ago when it was the challengers, right?
Yeah.
Guys that are so scary. And I agree. It was an odd and scary time. I think today that landscape looks a lot different. Actually, I'm less enthralled or concerned with sort of the fintech side as much as, like you said, the merchants, right? I think that the Home Depots and the Ubers and names that we know have learned a lot from the fintech crowd and looking to do really cool things, which are wicked opportunities for the banks. I've never seen a better time of better opportunities. And I've heard this from a lot of others. Maybe it's that lasting effect from that challenger scenario. But I've heard from a lot of other technology vendor folks that are a little bit abrasive of, we're on the bank side, right? And I know you look at that as you're kind of pulling parties together. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of fear out there. And I think the fear is because of the consent orders and the things that have happened. And once again, we are very transparent when we sell. And so, you know, I tell prospects all the time, look, you can't go into this thinking there is no risk, because there is risk. But be a banker and do what you need to do every day, but do it better when it comes to the fintech side. And we've got a lot of existing customers looking at digital branches, looking at banking as a service. We put all of that together in one instance of core. We silo at the branch. So they're not pulling all of this data together, trying to figure out how to put a call report together. But a lot of times what I talk to the customers about is, you know, think about what problem do you have today? And then let's figure out a way to solve it. So do you need deposits, which most banks do? You know, what is it? What are you good at? You know, we talk about Mike Fernandez from Bankers Lender. He talked about how he started that because he did a couple of loans for bankers and he thought that was really easy. I think we're pretty good at that. And then he made a business out of it to solve a problem because he had saturated his geographical location. So I think there's just story after story where there's opportunities there.
Yeah. Niches to riches, right?
Yeah.
Old Tom Shin used to always say niches to riches. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, 15 years ago. And I think it's come true. I really do. And
Yeah.
I've never seen a hotter time with more banks talking about digital to a niche, right? And I know
Exactly.
you guys do a lot of those.
Yeah. And think of affinity groups. You know, do you have one concentration of a type of customer or customers that have a certain lifestyle? I mean, there's 100 different use cases when you start thinking through it. And I just love to see some of these programs come together and roll out and see how successful they are. It's interesting. We just had a digital branch go live just within the last 30 days called Badass Bank. And to see their card and to see their marketing is just incredible. I talked about it at a company meeting and the CEO called me and said, were you talking about my bank or something? And I said, yeah, why? And he said, well, I have your employees trying to open an account. Because they love the look of the debit card. Didn't have anything to do with their lifestyle, you know?
That's cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit, just I'm thinking about the kind of the traditional side, right? So
Yeah.
or digital, I know, you know, retail is such a difficult topic these days and a difficult space these days, right? The lending side is a little bit better, right? But thinking about retail and retail deposits, certainly commercial and commercial deposits, which leads me into thinking about things like account opening and how do we get everything clean on the core, and then how are we, you know, opening a, you know, online banking, mobile banking, all the things that have to tie together. Would you kind of talk some about that? I know you guys work a lot on those things.
Yeah. First of all, I'm going to talk about two different thought processes there, because I do have banks that don't necessarily want to spin up a digital branch, but they have an interest in using online account opening to look towards a different geographical location or different customer to grab new customers, right? And that works. And you can still take advantage of the tools that we have that we use for our fintech customers and do that. The disadvantage of that is typically when you're pushing out a marketing campaign to get new customers, you're pushing it out with different interest rates, right? To get new customers. And yes, you can push that out and say this only applies to new customers, but then all of a sudden your existing customers are like, well, why? You know? Whereas if you start a digital branch with a different name, with a different process, then you keep track of your existing customers so you don't cause issues with them, and then go out and get those new customers with those teaser rates and things, and do that with a different name and a different process. But there's many different ways to look at that, and you can make it work both ways. The one thing I will say about the digital bank or digital branches, of course, it's going to be less expensive than opening up a brick and mortar, of course, but you're still going to spend money, and marketing is one of the biggest places you're going to spend money because you have to get the message out to new customers.
Would you touch on that more? It's such a whole, I think, for all of us, certainly for bankers. I mean, marketing has not been something that we have traditionally do.
No,
we haven't even had to do it.
But here's the best part. When you think you're good at it, it's really harder to fix. So yeah, that's a big problem.
I love that. And you know what? I'm going to fall on the sword a little bit here at DCI, because 5 years ago, we had a marketing problem. Not to the point of a problem with what we were doing or what we were saying, but you could walk into new states where we were not, and people didn't even know who DCI was. And so a name recognition was a big issue for us walking into a new state. Now, we do great once we get into a new state, and then from word of mouth and from reference, we grow, but it was always getting that first customer. We made a conscious effort to change how we marketed. We moved almost everything to digital, not everything, but almost everything to digital. We did targeted email campaigns around very specific scenarios. So, if I had a competitor sunset an internet banking product, guess what? I did a targeted email campaign around internet banking. I've done targeted email campaigns around ownership. I've done targeted email campaigns against other cores, but then I can see my rewards and I can see what's coming in. And here's the deal: have I spent a lot of money on marketing? Absolutely. But at the same time, I can show you the number of contracts that came in that my salespeople weren't near, that came in as a result of those marketing campaigns. So I can show how I'm paid for those marketing dollars. I talk to the banks about this all of the time because they have the capability to do the exact same thing. You can see who's clicking on your ads. And guess what? If they started to open a new account and they didn't follow all the way through, well, you have that data. Have somebody follow up on it from within the branch and help them finish if they got cold feet. So there's a lot of things these banks can do also, and they can target around the same type of campaigns. You have a bank down the street that's sold and you're the only community bank left in town, do a targeted email campaign around that. So I think there's just some great opportunities there. It's been a game changer for DCI.
I was actually sitting in the audience one time when you were talking about this very topic. And you were trying to show the bankers that, how we've done it in the past, and you kind of went through that process, and you were explaining why digital marketing you can change on the fly. We can see that maybe it was one word here, or maybe it was we changed one sentence, and all of a sudden, everything changed. And rather than just burying this thing all the way to the bitter end of misery, we can quickly make something change that turns it into a winning hand, and being able to maximize your dollars in that way. I remember sitting there thinking, part of me is kind of like, duh. And the other part of me is like, I bet there's so many people in this room that never really crossed their mind, because we all get caught in, hey, this is the way we've always done it, right?
It's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
And you know what? It happened to us. We put a targeted email campaign out there around internet banking because one of our competitors had sunset their products. Well, when we started looking at the clicks, the people that were clicking on that ad were end customers. Well, that's not who we sell to. We sell to the banks. And so we rallied really quickly and changed the message and then pushed the marketing campaign back out again so that it would target the banks rather than the end customer. But if that ad would have been in a paper publication, we couldn't change that on the fly like that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's a great call. It gets me thinking a lot about, I have this line and Dad laughs at me a lot, but anytime we make a boo-boo, a failure, or whatever you want to call it, I sit him down and crack a beer and I'm like, any way you cut it, this is our fault, right?
Yep.
I mean, you just got to bite the bullet and realize we are not achieving, or we're making boo-boos somewhere, somehow. It's definitely leads back to us. It's our fault. And I think marketing is such a tough one there that belongs at such a higher level than we've all always had it, right? And I think, marketing, advertising, I like branding, right? I think branding is the thing we're all really talking about.
Absolutely.
And, it's such a different thing. I think too, with some of what you talked about with the direct digital brands, it's a showcase and a spotlight. I think it's actually a pretty inspiring thing that other bankers can look at and say, that's doing it right. We should be more like that, right?
Yeah. And if you're looking at the data and you can prove out your numbers, just like what I spoke about earlier, when I can prove that I'm paying for my marketing dollars over and over again, well, then all of a sudden it's, when you first see the number, you're like, oh God. But then when you can see that you're paying for it, you recognize it.
Would you talk a little bit, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm thinking about kind of core consolidation. There's been some buying and selling. There's been, I don't want to necessarily use words like sunset, but transformation or whatever used are, right? And folks that and I think, in a lot of cases, probably a long-term good, but probably some short-term shuffle and pain and all that. And I think this kind of shakeup in the core market has got everything a little bit off kilter, right? And you want to just kind of talk about what that looks like to you guys, what reason, how you think it shakes out?
Yeah, absolutely. And so So first of all, I will tell you, I feel very fortunate. We have one core, so we support one product. All of our customers are on the same product. Not only are they on the same product, but they're on the same release of that product, except for during a pilot timeframe for a release. And so that's really easy to manage and to support. Now, some of that, that's for the best of DCI because of our size as well. I don't want to have to divide up my developers and try to decide where I'm working. I want to put all my efforts into one place. As I mentioned earlier, we have pretty modern technology as well, which is great for us. I think of a lot of the consolidation that you're seeing in the industry are a couple of different things. First of all, most of my competitors all do support multiple cores, at least two, some more than that, on both the credit union side and the bank side. But many of them support multiples just on the traditional bank side. So I think there's a need to try to pull all of that together. I also think, there's a lot of technology out there that's still mainframe technology. And so I think there's a lot of my competitors also trying to modernize their technology and move to something new, which isn't easy.
Right.
And so, I understand that process, but then because of that, the banks are in the middle of all of that.
Right. Yeah, it's a struggle, and it's one I'll say objectively. If I was in those shoes, I don't know what you do, right?
Yeah.
It's just a tough problem, and it's kind of everybody's problem, right? Something to
It
be,
is.
I think we're feeling it as an industry, how much it's all of our problem. And I
Yep.
think, you got me thinking on your M&A commentary on the bank side. I wonder how much bank M&A plays into some of that too, right?
Yep.
You have dwindling customer base and maybe a concentration of banks that can be a little bit of a challenge as well over time. And I think bankers need to understand that a little bit too, both from the side of, hey, don't sell your bank, right?
Yeah,
Also that,
absolutely.
having a peer group that's a target as a
Mhm.
technology peer can be a little bit of a challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I talked about how what our industry is looking like and the fact that I have so many banks that are doing acquisitions. I feel blessed that my banks are doing those acquisitions rather than being acquired. But at the same time, I wish none of it was happening. I wish all of them were looking to new technology and looking to new offerings out there to survive, because we all are fighting always to save community banks.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that you guys, I'm not trying to again sell for you, but
I'll let you, Dave.
it's okay, right? But I've watched this so much with you guys that you make a real big effort to let your institutions know the capabilities in front of them.
Mhm.
Where I think that's almost impossible when you talk about your competitors that have multiple cores, sometimes many of them, and it's difficult for them to do that because it's this segmented audience versus that
Yep.
segmented audience. For you, you have one audience, one product, and it's like we get this in a situation where you can do BaaS, you can do embedded finance, you can do a direct bank, or you can just be a traditional community bank and do all of it under the same technology platform.
Yep.
And once they're hearing that over and over again, and somebody says you want to sell your bank, everybody's got to get to a moment in their head that they realize that you can take the number of institutions down to a certain point to where this is a very, very valuable commodity, having that charter. They're not easy to get. And if everybody said, we're going to have, 300 mergers this year or whatever it is, well, then next year we expect 250. Okay, at some point out there, there's going to be zero. Holy
That's
shit,
right.
that we've got very few of these things left, and they're extremely valuable because they run all of FinTech.
Yep, I agree. And one of the things I talk to my customers about, look, I have customers that tell me, Sarah, I don't want to talk about FinTech. I don't want to. And I'm like, that's okay. But here's what I say to every one of those bankers. Look, you don't have to do FinTech today, and you can have no interest at all, but you better be educated and know what's out there. Because I do believe that it's an opportunity. And what's going to happen if 2 years from now you want to do it and everybody else is light years ahead of you and you're just starting to do the research, because it takes time. And
Yes.
So, I just preach to them, just be educated and know what's happening.
You're the
I
first
tell the same story.
CEO of a core I've heard say that.
Really?
Yeah, well said. I sell it a different way in the sense of there's some things that are so big that we shouldn't pass judgment, right? It isn't like, let's RFP this concept. It's, do we want to participate now? Maybe not,
Right.
that's fine, but let's continue to learn and educate because it's a transformational topic, and we want to watch where this thing goes, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I had a conversation with one of my customers not long ago about an infinity option for them. And you know, they're one of those that have just said, you know, they want to be involved, but they don't know where, they don't know where. But all of a sudden their eyes kind of lit up like, oh, wait, I see how this might work. And he's like, you can't talk to anybody else. You got to leave this with me. You know, and so it's nice when you see those light bulbs go off and you realize it doesn't have to be a huge undertaking. Yes, it takes work and you have to be serious about it, but there's some great opportunities.
Yeah. Something I've seen that's different with you guys that has actually really got me thinking a lot. You know, you're proving out, be it a business case or a strategy, right? You want to hear the bank bring you their strategy, and then you're looking at yourselves as the builders, the operators, right? And I think that's really different. I actually has grown on me over years now. It really has. You want to talk any about that? I just think it's so different.
Yeah, it's something that you've probably heard Tana talk about it before. In fact, we talked about it with Mike Fernandez the first time he came and talked to us. He kind of had this idea, and Tana said, you know, where's your business plan? And he's like, and he said, you're the first core that's ever said that to me. And so, you know, and all the purpose of that is to encourage the bankers to sit down and think through. So think through it, and then let's all get back together and figure out how to make it work together. But I think it's important. You know, I have so many bankers that come to me and say, okay, I'm ready. And I'm like, ready for what? Don't know, you know? And so then I absolutely will help work with them to talk through, well, you know, what's your problem? What are you aiming? Are you looking for deposits? Are you looking for loans? That. But at the end of the day, the bank's got to own the business plan. The bank's got to own the deliverable. I mean, I'll help them with tech and with everything all day long to help them get going. But they've got to be able to also defend it to their examiners and sell it.
Yeah. You know what's crazy is I think I was on that call and,
with Mike.
When she said that, and I remember, you know, this was early in the game, y'all, that not a lot of people were doing this back then. And for her to be clever enough to say, look, you know, today, and the verbiage we would use today when talking about our regulator and trying to do something like this would be build a policy around this, right? And so everybody, okay, I've got a policy now to give my regulator. And she said, write a business plan, which is so much better because you've actually solved your own internal issues at the same time that you've really got your policy written and taken care of.
Well, and to brag on DCI just a little bit too, a lot of my
That's what you're here for, man.
Yeah. A lot of my competitors, salespeople, they wouldn't have stopped the process in a sales process to allow the bank to go back and do work. They would have done whatever it took to get that sale done. And that's not how we do business. You know, we want to work with a customer and be a partner, not just get a sale.
Beautiful.
Yeah. When you talked about references, I think the same way, right? It's like, what's the worst thing that could happen? It's not losing a deal. We don't even think that way. It's I have somebody who's not thrilled with me. That would be the worst thing that could happen, right? Because if I did something else, I just had delighted, happy customers. They'll all go tell their friends and the phone will ring and I'll be okay. You know?
Exactly. And who wants to start a relationship with a customer that's mad from day one? You know, and if you're just transparent and upfront and work with them, then you'll avoid that.
No, appreciate it. Hey, take a minute, give me final thoughts. Anything that's on your mind, anything we didn't cover?
No, I appreciate it. Always appreciate the opportunity to talk to both of you. We've got a lot going on again this year, so I think 25 is going to be another great year and working with some great customers. We're continuing to move up the food chain a little bit with the size of banks we're working with, but that certainly doesn't mean we're stepping away from the smaller banks either. I'm really excited about seeing more and more existing customers and prospects looking into FinTech ideas and just some really cool things on the horizon. So thank you for the time.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
We appreciate it, guys. We'll catch you all later.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.